Hello everyone, welcome to NUS Learning Fest 2020. My name is Shona and it's my pleasure to be meeting you today. I'm currently a software engineer at GovTech and I'm going to be sharing with you my internship project when I was still in my GDIP SA program. So without further ado, let's jump right into the presentation. Welcome everyone. The title of my project is called Digital Transformation of Demo Plot Trial Process. Not to worry about the demo plots, I'll explain further in the presentation later. The company I interned for is BASF South East Asia. Here's the agenda for today. Just a rough overview of what we'll be covering. I'll begin with the company background, a little bit more about BASF, the business problem my teammate and I had to solve, and how we came up with the proposed solution. A short demo I'll do for our front-end prototype, and then we'll go over the timeline and project complexity. Finally, I'll take you through the system benefits that this overhaul will bring to the company. We begin with some background about BASF. So BASF is one of the world's largest chemical producers. They have many business units, of which some are covered here. As for me, I belong to the functional units. So the functional units include HR, Global Digital Services, just to name a few. And the interesting thing is that Global Digital Services at BASF provides more of non-core IT services. For example, IT support rather than software development. I was onboarded because they wanted to experiment with in-house productions. So when I joined them, there were actually only 2 software engineers, my supervisor and I. The business unit that we had to serve was the Regional HQ for Agricultural Solutions. Let's dive right into the business problem. We begin at the top. When BASF launches a new product, so for example a herbicide, the first thing that they want to do is to generate market interest and hype around it. In order to achieve this, they will deploy their local promoters on the ground who will essentially act like product ambassadors. These promoters will approach the local farmers and request for a small portion of the existing crop. So this small portion will be the demo plot, which is what we saw in the introductory slide. The promoters will apply the free sample of the new product onto the demo plot, and results of the application will be recorded on pen and paper. So the idea behind this is like a free demonstration trial. Hopefully at the end of this trial, the farmer can witness the efficacy of the new product and be enticed to purchase it when it launches. Well, we can see here that the current process is very tedious and manual. For example, the promoters in Thailand are recording their results here on pen and paper, as we mentioned before. Then they will take photos with their mobile phones and then return to their workstations to transfer the data onto an Excel sheet before it gets emailed to management. So this was problem number 1 that we identified. Initially, it looked like this was the only issue, but then we realized a bigger problem. So to explain this, we have to go back slightly upwards of the pipeline before a product is launched. Prior to a product launch, R&D has performed multiple experimentation to determine the best application rates and assessment days to showcase the product in its best light. And this is all recorded in a wordy, voluminous, relatively unappealing to read documentation called the product protocol. So by right, the promoters are supposed to conduct their demo trials according to the protocol set by R&D. However, they have found it difficult to read and comprehend. Instead, they decided to do away with it and would start to attend a short training on how to use the product, and then they will write a proposal requesting for samples and also proposing the application doses and assessment days in the document. Ideally, everyone would plug in the value set by R&D to maintain consistency, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case here. Every promoter would put in their own values, and these values would then be submitted to local HQ for approval. On the approval side, there are multiple emails being sent back and forth for a few rounds of approval, and local HQ are unable to enforce consistency across the proposals submitted. Now, this has caused problem number 2, which is inconsistent demo plot trials being carried out by promoters. And then this problem will then cascade downstream, whereby regional HQ finds that they cannot make use of the results submitted from the trials. And that has resulted in problem number 3. Given these issues, we were then tasked with proposing a solution and starting off with a minimum viable product for Thailand. Let's bring back the issues to resolve. We first looked at problem number 1. This was pretty straightforward. What we had to do was to digitize the manual process by creating a mobile application. This mobile application will have offline capabilities to cater for intermittent connection with the internet in the fields. Within a single app, the users should be able to log, record, capture photos, and submit their results. So this resolves the first problem. As for the second problem, our stakeholders in Thailand have made it clear that they only want a digital facelift of their existing processes. So that means that they do not want us to revamp their proposals system. So with this, we went ahead and created a proposals and approvals module within the mobile application. However, this did not really solve the root cause of the second problem, since the promoters were still submitting their individual proposals for the demo plot trials. So this solution actually only improves the user experience of the proposal creation and approvals. System-wise, we are still not addressing the pain point at regional HQ's level. So after thorough discussions with both the Thailand and regional stakeholders, we had to scrap the proposal system, bring back the protocols instead. We promised them that we would transform the proposals into something easy, lightweight, and user-friendly. This module was to serve as a portable library for the promoters so that we can cut out a lot of steps here. Instead, the promoters will retrieve the protocols and go straight into registering their demo plot trials. With this, we removed the second problem, which also resolves the third issue. Since there's proper business enforcement of the demo plot trial process, and management will now be able to leverage on the data collected. We'll go into the product architecture now. It's a simple 3-tier application, with the front end being built on Angular Ionic technology. This allows us to write a single code base that can compile down to both iOS and Android phones. Our mid-tier application, which is the backend server, is built as a Loopback Express application. As for the database, our choice was NoSQL MongoDB. I've also indicated here our choice to use a third-party application, which is Auth0, that makes use of JSON web tokens to handle authentication so that we can free ourselves of having to persist the user login info in our database all the time. And lastly, all our applications, including our CI/CD pipelines, will be hosted on Microsoft Azure Cloud. So now let's head over to view a demo of the front-end prototype. Welcome to the prototype demo. In the earlier iteration, we had a proposals module. So let's say I'm a promoter. I would like to take a look at my proposals. Here's a list of all my proposals. I could tap on one of it. And here's the status and the relevant information. I could choose to update it. And then I could go back. I could take a look at another proposal. I could look at the demo plots tied to this proposal. And let's say I want to take a look at this demo plot that I've registered under this proposal. Here's the location that I've geotagged it to. For this example, I was using a Singapore address. And here are some of the past applications that I made on my demo plot. Photos that I've taken. I could update it. So instead of typing the values here, I may want to just tap on the plus or minus button. And then I could take a look at the assessments. So here are the assessment ratings presented in a chart form. So it's a bit more pleasing to the eye, and it just adds a bit more fun and interactivity to the application. Here are photos that I've taken and the conclusions. We made use of these expandables and collapsibles where there's quite a bit of data to look at so that the user can control how much information that he is receiving at one go. And when I update, we use the stars to make it a little bit more fun to look at. And I could edit my photos and the captions. And I could take photos in-app as well. So this is the older version. And now let's take a look at the newer version where we replace the proposals module with the protocol. Here's an example of a protocol that we have. It's for BASTA, which is a herbicide. If you can recall, one of the pain points that the user was facing was that they found the protocol that R&D had provided very wordy, very unappealing to look at. So our job is to make this protocol, transform it into something that is user-friendly and very fun to look at. We've played around with lots of colors, scrollables, and contrasting colors to help the promoters pick out the necessary information that they will need. So for example, if let's say I look at rubber, I could just scroll through and see the relevant application rates that I need depending on the conditions that I have. For assessment guidelines, there's actually quite a lot of information to be presented. We play around with chips so that the promoters can again pick out the necessary and important information like the assessment days that they have to take note of. So there's no need for a proposal, there's no need for approval. Once I retrieve a protocol on my app, I can directly add a demo plot. One thing to note is how we enforce the business rules. So if you recall the crops applicable for BASTA, there's a fixed list to it. So by presenting them with a fixed selection that they can only choose from, we ensure that the promoters are registering only one of the approved crops for BASTA. Same goes for pests. Instead of typing my address, I could choose to use a geolocation. We also made sure that we have auto complete so that the promoters don't have to type so much. For example, Thailand. Here, right? And then I can confirm my location and the address will be there for me. If there's anything that I need to edit, I can then add on manually myself. So this is one of the basic flows that we'll be covering. I'll move on to demo the value-added features I've added for the prototype now. Since this app will be used by promoters from Thailand and eventually Indonesia and Vietnam, where English may not be their native language, I felt it would be good if we could set up the app for internationalization. So I started off by manually writing some translation files for Thailand to showcase to the stakeholders. In future, all we will need are the JSON translation files to be loaded. Simple. Another small feature we have is the notifications module. So we want to push reminders to the promoters since the dates for assessment and application are fixed. This way, they don't have to save all the dates in their phone manually nor remember them in their memory. So this concludes our demo and I hope you enjoyed it. We'll go back to the slides now. Welcome back. Here's a timeline of my 5-month internship journey at BASF. I came in shortly after the project was kicked off and I spent my first month picking up tech stack and also getting requirements from the stakeholders. In the next month, my supervisor and I worked through the wireframing and design modeling. This was followed by rapid prototyping in the next 2 months. And then in December, we re-engineered the business process and I spent my last month redeveloping the new iteration. As for the complexity of our minimum viable product, it was roughly of medium complexity. We had 3 modules in which we have touched on earlier. The demo plot module is extended with the 2 sub-modules, which are the applications and assessments sub-module. There were roughly 12 user stories, and here are some specific features that our stakeholders have requested for. As for the distribution of the workload, I took on most of the front-end development while my supervisor worked on the back-end. We shared the database engineering and design workload. Here are some of the benefits we hope our application and system has brought to the company. For the promoters, we want to provide them with a one-stop portal on their phones that can act as a task reminder, a protocol library, and a reporting tool that can allow them to log their movement and tasks into the system. This will be used for monitoring purposes by the management. So it's not just the promoters that we hope to benefit. HQ will also be able to pull this data easily for analysis, and like I mentioned just now, monitor the data of ground activities. We hope we can bring this project to greater heights in future. The next phase will be to develop a web portal for management to upload product protocols and also visualize ground data. And then in the third phase, hopefully we can incorporate AI and ML for image detection of weeds and diseases. Before we reach the end, I'd like to share one of my biggest lessons learned during this internship, and that is to know your stakeholders. When we say software engineering, the first thing we tend to think of is reading, writing code, building software, and DevOps, right? But one of the often overlooked aspects is the upstream process where we have to understand our stakeholders thoroughly. And this is not just the requirements that they want, but also to understand the differing needs of the different stakeholders at every level. Constant communication and feedback at all levels of stakeholders is so important in the software engineering process. Lastly, I would like to thank a few people who have been supporting me on the Deep SA journey as well as my internship. First of all, my school, NUSISS, was such a wonderful program with great lecturers and a comprehensive curriculum. Next is BASF and my supervisor Lai Him for onboarding me and the opportunities I got to co-own the development of the MVP. I've reached the end of my presentation, and here's my contact if you have any questions or comments on it. It's been a joy and pleasure taking you through this, and may you have a pleasant week ahead. Bye!